Good evening. It's time to get started on story time. I may just be a tad bit early, but I don't think so. If I am, we'll all catch up. We're going to be in 1 Samuel chapter 13. We have seen that Samuel has anointed Saul to be king. And we're going to start in chapter 13. I'm going to be reading from the Amplified. And I think you're going to see some things that we need to talk about today. I think it's something we all struggle with. Chapter 13, 1 Samuel. Now Saul was approximately 40 years old when he began to reign. And when he'd reigned 2 years over Israel, Saul chose 3,000 men of Israel. 2,000 were to be with him in Michmash, what a name, and the hill country of Bethel. And 1,000 were to be with his son Jonathan in Gibeah of Benjamin. The rest of the men he sent away, each one to his own home. Now Jonathan smote the Philistine garrison at Geba, and the Philistines heard of it. Saul blew the trumpet throughout the land, saying, "Let the Hebrews hear, let them know." All of Israel heard that Saul had defeated the Philistine garrison, and also that Israel had become an abomination to the Philistines. Okay. And the people were called out to join Saul at Gilgal. So he's trying to get them to come. Now, the Philistines gathered to fight with Israel 30,000 chariots. That's a lot of chariots. And 6,000 horsemen and troops with sand on the seashore in multitude. They came up and encamped at Michmash, east of Bethaven. When the men of Israel saw that they were in a tight situation, for their troops were hard pressed, they hid in caves and holes and rocks and tombs and pits. Some Hebrews had gone over the Jordan to the land of Gad and Gilead. As for Saul, he was still in Gilgal, and all the people followed him trembling. They were afraid. They were scared. Now Saul waited 7 days, according to the set time that Samuel had appointed. But Samuel had not come to Gilgal yet, and the people were starting to scatter from Saul. So Saul said, "Bring me the burnt offering and the peace offering." And he offered the burnt offering, which he was forbidden to do. Only a priest is supposed to do that. And just as he had finished offering that burnt offering, behold, here comes Samuel. Saul went out to meet him and greet him. And Samuel said, how do you think he's going to feel about this? "What have you done?" Saul said, "Well, because I saw the people were scattering from me, and that you did not come within the days appointed, and that the Philistines were assembled at Michmash, I thought the Philistines will come down now upon me at Gilgal, and I've not made supplication to the Lord, so I forced myself to offer a burnt offering." How many times have we done things because we got impatient? Well, Saul got impatient. And so he decided he would take matters into his own hand. But this is what Samuel said to Saul. "You've done foolishly. You've not kept the commandment of the Lord your God, which he commanded you to do. For the Lord would have established your kingdom, Saul, over Israel forever, if you had just kept his commandments. But now your kingdom shall not continue." So it cost him his kingdom, because he got impatient. "The Lord has sought out a man after his own heart, and the Lord has commanded him to be a prince and a ruler over his people, because you have not kept what the Lord commanded you to do." And Samuel went up from Gilgal to Gibeah of Benjamin. And Saul numbered the people that were left with him, and they were only 600. Boy, the numbers dropped, didn't they? Whenever they see that there might be a problem, isn't that kind of what happens? When you get in a tight spot, people kind of have a tendency to leave you. Your true friends will stick it out with you. Saul and Jonathan, his son, and the people with them remained at Gibeah of Benjamin, but the Philistines encamped at Michmash. The raiders came out of the Philistine camp in 3 different companies. One company turned toward Ophrah, to the land of Shuel. Another turned toward Beth Horon, and another toward the border overlooking the valley of Zebulun, toward the wilderness. Now there weren't any metal workers to be found throughout the land of Israel, for the Philistines said, "Lest the Hebrews make swords for spears." So they took care of all of that for them, because they wanted to be the ones that controlled the swords and the shields. But each of the Israelites had to go down to the Philistines to get his plowshare, his mattocks, his axe, and his sickle sharpened. And the price for a plowshare and mattocks was a pim, which I don't have a clue how much a pim is, and 1/3 of a shekel for axes and for setting the goads. So on the day of the battle, neither sword nor spear was found in the hand of any of the men who were with Saul and Jonathan, except for Saul and Jonathan. They're the only ones who had any swords or anything of that nature, or a spear. And the garrison of the Philistines went out to the pass of Michmash. Now we're going to stop there tonight. If you were confronted with a situation where you didn't know how you were going to handle it, which all of us do. We all have times like that. And sometimes when we're younger, we have a tendency to, our hearts start racing, even as adults. I mean, there's been times my heart has started racing. Our heart starts racing and we think, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? Maybe there's a bully at school that's making fun of you, or there's a bully even at your work. You know, as an adult, sometimes there's bullies at work. You have to learn to stand your ground. You have to learn to be a child of God. And in order to do that, you trust him. And these people were afraid. And I think I'd be afraid if I was up against an army that all had swords. And they all had shields. And they all had weapons of battle. But next time we're going to take them and see what happens and how they were overthrown. And that's I kind of gave you a little clue how they're overthrown. So it's amazing what God does, but you've got to trust him. So we know now Saul was impatient and he wanted to do things his own way instead of doing things God's way. So that's something that we need to learn not to do, is to seek God and find out what he wants us to do and do things his way. So this week, what I want you to concentrate on is when you come up against a situation, go to God and find out how he wants you to handle it, because he'll show you a way out where sometimes it seems like there is no way. It's amazing what God can do. So you hang in there this week. Know that God loves you and that God is going to be with you no matter what you face, no matter what the devil throws at you this week, no matter what anything happens, that God is always with you. He'll never leave you and he'll never forsake you once you accept him as yours. So hang in there. God loves you. We love you. We'll see you next week. Let's find out what happens to Saul and Jonathan. I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.